Okay, well, welcome again to the Kentucky Monthly Climate Perspectives on Drought and Hydrological Conditions. This is the March edition. This webinar series is presented by the Kentucky Climate Center at Western Kentucky University in partnership with the National Integrated Drought Information System, NIDIS, and in coordination with the Midwest Drought Early Warning System. Production and delivery of this webinar reflects the contributions of many partners committed to serving the needs of Commonwealth of Kentucky and its people. Next month's scheduled webinar is scheduled for the first Thursday of the month, which is April 6th, and it will be again at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1 p.m. Central Time. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing. We are having some technical problems today, so we won't be live streaming on YouTube, but it will be available following the end of the webinar. All right, so just a quick outline. We'll look at some recent conditions and followed by some local impacts across the state. And then we'll look ahead at outlooks for the next month and season. And then we'll end with a summary and some questions and discussion. See if I can move this bar out of the way. So we did kick off the month with a little winter weather, at least. We had a little snow and ice around, and there's a few pictures there on the left, Fulton County, Clinton County, and some of that stuck around for a couple of days along the in a few locations. All right. Well, let me just start with the biggest news of the day, and that is the February temperatures. We were incredibly warm. We had a statewide average temperature of 48.6 degrees, which was actually 8.2 degrees above normal. And that meant that we were the warmest February on record going back to 1895. And we actually blew away the old record, which was actually set in 2017, and we beat it by 2.4 degrees. You look at the average mean across the state, we were anywhere from, depending on where you were in the state, 7-8 degrees or more above. And then you look at the daily maximum temperatures, we were up to 10 degrees or over 10 degrees above normal for the daily highs across the northern portion of the state. And then you look at the average minimum temperatures, and we were again 7-8 plus degrees, especially across the southern tier. So again, we did set a February record, warmest on record. And now that we're into spring, meteorological spring, we can look back at our winter season, our winter statistics. And we came out with an average temperature of 41.7 degrees, which was nearly 6 degrees above normal, which made it the second warmest winter on record. The record was still set back in 1931-32, and they had an incredible 44.2 degrees average. So we weren't really even close to that. And then when you look at just the January and February temperatures, we so far with 2023, we're the second warmest on record with a statewide average of 43.9 degrees, which is 8.7 degrees above normal. And we're just shy of that all-time record in 1932, which was 44.0 degrees. So we were 1/10 of a degree below. Of course, these are preliminary numbers, and we could maybe still tie or even exceed 1932, but it looks like we'll be just shy of that. But really the big news from February, and just an incredibly warm month and an incredibly warm start to the season. So switching to precipitation, of course, the last 7 days saw some convection across the central portions of the state. Nothing too extraordinary about that, although a few stations did pick up over an inch of rain. You see at least 2 sites there with over 1.5 inches, but fairly dry over the western and eastern portions of the state. Now, if we look back 2 weeks, then we start capturing some of those flooding rains across the eastern Kentucky, and you see the numbers jump from a half an inch to over 5 inches in a lot of areas. So this really did give a lot of at least the eastern half of the state, quite a bit of rain for the month. And if we go back for the full month through all of February, you see pretty good amounts across the state, and particularly again across the eastern 2/3. As you move north, it's a bit drier, and especially as you get into Indiana and further north, they're a bit drier there. But for the most part, most of the state got fairly good amounts for the month of February. If we go back to 2 months, the last 60 days, again, fairly widespread amounts, about 10 inches across nearly the whole state, pretty uniform until you get really north of Kentucky, where you see those numbers really start to drop off. And they are seeing quite a bit drier soils to the north. But fairly adequate across the state of Kentucky. And then we go back for the full 90 days through the entire winter season. December was a bit drier, and so the numbers aren't too different here, roughly 14 inches, 15 inches across the whole state. And again, fairly uniform until you get north of the Ohio River, especially into central northern Indiana. And so looking at the numbers, Kentucky averaged about 4.36 inches of rainfall in February, which is about ½ inch above normal, but very close to normal for the whole state. And then, so February ranked as really the 41st wettest February on record out of the 129 years. And when you look at the winter as a whole, the full 90 days, we averaged around 11.75 inches of precip, which is just slightly below normal, but 61st wettest on record, which was almost as normal as you can get for the winter season. So very, very average for the winter, which wasn't too bad because it did help replenish our soils, as we'll show here soon. So snowfall. Now, we know it was a very warm February, and so that's reflected in our snowfall amounts. There in the upper left, you see no snowfall in some areas of the state shown in gray, and then very small trace amounts, or very small amounts, less than ½ inch through actually most of the state. And it's only when you get in far eastern Kentucky, southeastern Kentucky, that you start getting a couple of inches of snow, but even that puts them at less than ½ less than 25% of normal, and in most of the states under 5% of normal, which you might expect with the warmest February on record. So it's maybe even a little surprising we had any at all, but not much snow for February. And then we look at the snowfall for the winter season, the last 90 days, and again, not much to speak of. We have a couple of inches across most of central Kentucky, but that's not much for the full winter season. Now, if you get more northern areas, western Kentucky, you start to see a little more than that, 3 to 5 inches. A few few select counties got over 5 inches for the winter season, but for the whole season, that's pretty small amount. So when you look at those percentages, we're well below normal, anywhere from the eastern half of the states well below 50% of normal, actually below 25% of normal. The western half of the states a little better, but most in the 50 to 75% range. So what does that mean for our drought and soils? Actually quite good. We are well saturated here in Kentucky and across most of the east. And it's in large part due to the La Nina rains we've gotten. And again, when we look at the soil moisture, we see how the soils have replenished over the winter season, especially with that lack of drying. And in fact, the country as a whole looks quite quite improved over what we were seeing in the last, especially last fall, and even over the last few months. The atmospheric rivers continue to bring moisture into western portions of the country, and that's really reflected in these in the drought monitor. So this is the latest map, and you see really a few dry areas to our north of the Ohio River, but otherwise the east of Mississippi is quite good. And of course, none here in Kentucky, not even in areas normally dry. And when we look at the change over the winter season, this is a 12-week change map, and we see that we've improved just tremendously since the beginning of the winter season. In fact, not only Kentucky, but Tennessee, as well as large areas in and around and east of the Mississippi River. And even portions of the Central Plains have improved quite markedly, and as is the West with those atmospheric rivers. So nice improvement overall across the country, and not necessarily expected to the degree that we have seen. And if we look at the stream flows across the country, again, quite good over a vast majority of the country. There's still a few portions of the Central Plains that are suffering, but those areas are pretty limited and shrinking in area. If we look at Kentucky, again, the last 7 days, right at where we would expect them to be, right around normal, if not a little higher. If we go back and look at the entire month, you see, especially over eastern portions of the state, streams quite a bit above average, especially following that February 15th, 16th event, where we saw some flooding rains over portions of the eastern Kentucky. And if we look at just a select sites around the state, soil moisture, we see that, and this is the last 90 days, so through the winter season, you see at least in a lot of areas we were fairly dry to kick off winter back in December, and then with the rains we received during December and then into January, you see those soils have really replenished and become saturated. And especially at the lower levels now, we see that really all the sites are well saturated, as you'd like to see going into spring. And this was a really interesting, kudos to Tiffany here and our resident staff pulling this together. You know, the last few years, February has been fairly warm, and but you never know what you're going to get. And so these 4 pictures are taken March 1st of each year, going back to 2020, and you see just how different our late winter season can be. You know, 2020, you see some green fields there. It doesn't look terribly unlike this year, although still a bit muddy, a little wet. And then 2021, of course, that field is completely flooded. 2022, quite a bit drier, but you know, no green yet, quite a bit colder. And then, of course, this year, 2023, with our warmest February ever, and you see a nice, very lush field. So I thought this was pretty interesting in showing just the contrast that we can get here in Kentucky this time of year. And another comparison, this is the beginning of February of this year in Ballard County. You see, again, maybe even hints of snow or wet ground there, maybe some light snow left over. And then, you know, 4 weeks later, it's lush and just looks like mid to late spring. So quite a bit of growth going on out there and a very early start to spring. So we take a look at the storm reports from the last 30 days, and really the 2 themes emerge. One is there was a lot of wind, and 2, there was quite a bit of rain in at least a couple of counties, flooding rains. And we also had a little bit of snow, a little bit of sleet here around, here, there, landslides to the east. But for the most part, a few damaging thunderstorm winds in far western Kentucky, a few others scattered here and there. But again, the big news was a lot of non-thunderstorm straight line winds that across the whole entire state. And then again, those rains from February 15th, 16th. So this is those precip totals that we were seeing in mid-February. And you see this is the 24-hour precip totals, and you see across a swath across central Kentucky, anywhere from 2 to 3.5, almost nearly 4 inches in some locations. So quite a bit of rain over a very short period of time caused quite a few problems in a number of areas. This is just one snapshot our field technician took while he was out in Lewis County. And this is, it's kind of hard to understand the context unless you know what this normally looks like. But again, the flash flooding in a lot of areas caught people by surprise. And luckily it didn't get worse than it did, but quite a bit of rain. And of course, the other news was the straight line winds that we had. And this was a very windy winter. And this was just from a few days ago from the Mesonet stations. These are maximum wind speed gusts during the day. And you see, especially out far western Kentucky, we had quite a few sites over 50 miles per hour and one that hit 61. So, and I know just here locally in Bowling Green, we saw quite a bit of, light damage, but damage nonetheless. And this was an interesting couple of plots. This is from the various, the 3 weather forecast offices that cover most of the state. And what you see here are cumulative wind advisories collected through the year at these 3 WFOs going back to 2009. And so what you see is that so far this year, 2023 has set the record for number of wind advisories this early in the year. And now this is from the Jackson office. If we look at the Louisville office, we're also the peak of any of those years, and the number of advisories so far 8. And again, if we look at Paducah, we've had 7 issued from there. So a record for all 3 WFOs for this early in the year. So it's not just your imagination. It is indeed a very windy start to the year, as is it's a very warm start to the year. And we look at a list of the storm reports across the state, and that's kind of reflected in some of the damage that was recorded this last month. These are collected by the Storm Prediction Center, and you see everything from, tree limbs blown down to quarter-size hail at one point in Monroe County. Here's a roof of a hardware store taken off an Ace Hardware store. That's probably from a thunderstorm. Power lines down, trees down. But that's that February 16th event. And then on February 22nd, we had quite a bit of damage, just various power outages, trees down across the Paducah area. So scattered damage, which normally you wouldn't think would be too severe, but for February, that's a bit unusual. Now, how does all of this impact agriculture? Well, as you can imagine, it is an early start to spring. And this is, I believe, the Buffalo Distillery on the left and UK on the right. So you see an early start to, I believe, red buds blooming and pear trees in some locations. So an early start. Now this was interesting. This is looking at the growing degree days compared to previous years, going back to 2017, and you see upper left is Lexington, Paducah, Bowling Green, and Jackson. And in all 4 cases, we're tracking 2017 in the growing degree days so far this calendar year. And again, being the warmest February on record, that this makes sense. So we're right on the path of right with 2017. And but I think this will maybe slow some given the forecast that we have coming up. You know, of course, one danger with this is that now that things are blooming, things are starting to grow, a freeze could do some damage. So we'll have to watch that. One other comment from Matt Dixon about just the agriculture across the state. The Arctic air in December did leave a lot of damage to thornless blackberries, some damage to peaches and grapes across the state. Among the peach varieties and across western Kentucky, the bud survival was only 2 to 9%. Across western Kentucky, it's probably similar in other areas, other regions. And now the winter wheat is in the jointing stage across at least south central Kentucky. And you know, it would take temperatures below 24 degrees for several hours to cause damage now. But of course, there are no preventive measures for that. So should that occur. So again, we'll just have to watch with the early start to spring, we'll have to watch the forecast coming up, because it is going to be colder, or at least more seasonable than it has been. Now looking ahead, this was from generated yesterday, so some of the rains we've already experienced or kind of included in this map. But you see the next 7 days shows a very wet Commonwealth. Several inches of rain are expected across the state, and we've seen some of that already. And we continue out to 6 to 10 days ahead. You see this very cold air coming in to the northwest, and very, although warm, across the southern tier. And for the most part, western portions of the U.S. we'll see above normal precip, with only the northeast is dry. For Kentucky, near normal precip and temperatures for the 6 to 10 days. Now we look a little further ahead, we see that cold air filtering to the east, and just how cold is a little unclear yet, but near normal to maybe slightly above normal odds for precipitation. So it looks like that at least seasonally wet will continue, if not above normal precipitation, and maybe cooler than normal temperatures for at least the next several weeks. And then we look at the month ahead. Equal chances for temperature. I think we will see that cooler air, but what it does after that, probably a little warmer. So for the month as a whole, probably about equal chances. But you do see that bullseye over Kentucky for the monthly precip outlook. Now, again, some of that I think is the next week, but even after that, I think we'll see at least average rainfall, which would put us over for the month. So we are seeing a somewhat wet start to the season as well. And that wouldn't be out of line with the previous springs that we've had, which have seen actually quite a bit of rainfall. And we look out for the full spring, and temperature-wise, I think maybe you're starting to see hints of El Nino here, maybe not yet, but they are forecasting maybe slightly above chances for a warm spring. And that's even though March may be a little cooler than average, they are still calling for a warmer than average spring. But again, we look at that seasonal precip outlook, and it's forecasting above normal precip for the spring, and maybe that's even La Nina as well playing a role here as that fades away. And we do look at the INSO outlook. And again, this is a continuation of what we were seeing with the forecast last month, except now it looks like an even stronger signal that we'll be going into an El Nino as we approach fall. And again, what that means for Kentucky, probably above normal temperatures and above normal rainfall. But it looks like a fairly neutral phase through the spring and summer. Now the month drought outlook, again, more of the same and improvement across the country. You see really east of the eastern half of the country's in good shape, except for Florida and some portion of Michigan, but otherwise no drought at all east of Missouri. And even improvement in California, which we haven't seen in a while. And even among the Mountain West, no drought at all at this time. So good news, especially compared to where we were last fall. And we look at the seasonal outlook, and it's even better. Going back and forth, you see the current outlook, and they're forecasting even further improvement. And so that greenish color is the drought removal likely. And wow, that's nice to see across a big portion of the West. And of course, they're dependent on their on the water for their drinking water and irrigation, so that means a lot to them. So vast improvement in this. And we look at the wildfire potential, well below normal for us, for our region. Again, we're well saturated and the streams are full, so we're in good shape from fires and drought at this point. So just kind of a summary. So 2023 is off to a record warm start. January and February ranked 4th and 1st warmest since 1895, and second warmest year to date so far. We'll see what March does and how we drop in the rankings if March turns out to be cool, but just a record warm start to the year. And as far as precipitation, 2022-23 winter was near normal, in fact very normal, but again the second warmest of all time. We're completely drought free at this point, and that looks to continue for the foreseeable future. Hopefully not too wet like we have been on previous springs. But looking at the seasonal outlooks, they hint at cooler temperatures, but above normal precip. But again, looking out further, looks warm and wet. And La Nina is coming to an end, and there is an increasing probability that El Nino will develop in the fall. So thank you again. Again, the next regularly scheduled webinar is for April 6th of next month. And thanks again to Matt Dixon and Chip Zimmer and all of our staff that contributed to the slides here. And again, thank you for tuning in. So I'll stop and take questions, and I know there's a few. I'm going to stop sharing it here. And any comments or questions? I'm going to go through the chat here. And Chip asked, did that count the wind advisories warnings out for tonight and tomorrow? No, it only included, I believe that's a good question. Matt, I don't know if you have an answer to that on the slide with the wind advisories warnings. Did that include the current list?
Yeah, that did not include tomorrow. So that was through yesterday, I want to say. So yeah, we have another one. I want to say, did they just issue a high wind warning for tomorrow?
I know they were talking about an advisory at least. Yeah. So that would add to the numbers.
Most definitely. Yep.
Yeah, Matt, they issued one for most of central Kentucky.
Gotcha.
And I see the next question was also answered. How far ahead is the small grain crops and canola as compared to normal?
Yeah, I put on there, based on those growing degree days and whatnot, we're tracking really close to 2017 right now. And again, that was one of our warmest winters of all time. So 2023 is pretty similar to what we saw back in 2017. But I talked to Dr. Van Sanford. He's one of our wheat specialists at UK. I actually did a presentation for his class a couple of days ago, and he made some calls across the state. And the farthest wheat in development he's seen across the state of Kentucky was down south central Kentucky, and they're in their jointing stage. And compared to 2017, I don't have the information in front of me, but I want to say we were a little farther along. But we got into the second week of March, and we had lows dip into the teens, low 20s in spots. And it was interesting because we really thought we were going to see significant damage. And if I remember right, I don't believe we saw quite as much as what we had expected. Now, we did see quite a bit. It was either a year or two ago when we had temperatures drop well below normal at the start of May. I think it was May 9th. That really impacted the wheat crop. But again, if I remember correctly, I don't think we saw the amount of damage in 2017 that we expected, nor do I think we are as far as along in development in 2023. So fingers crossed, we get in this cold spell. I think Jerry mentioned it earlier. You know, we're now in March. It is showing a solid blue color on there, meaning, you know, confidence is pretty high that we're going to see below normal temperatures, but this is not the dead of winter anymore. We are in March. Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, but middle of March, average high is what, low to middle 50s? Is that?
Yeah, and yeah. I mean, I think, like you said, even if we're below normal, it's not going to be. It may not be all that cold.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, below normal for this year could be high temperatures in the 40s. Maybe we do have some lows dipping well into the 30s, maybe the 20s. But I would be surprised if we got as low as we did in 2017. But we're still, you know, week to 2 weeks out from that event or that cold air. So we got some time and things can change. So we'll see.
And Matt, a question about the soils. I haven't looked at the soil temperatures today, but you have to think that the soils are fairly warm given the temperatures we've had. And would that help contribute to kind of saving those plants, so to speak?
Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, we talk about germination and whatnot. While we're on this webinar, I contacted the UK turf specialist last night because I like to fight crabgrass in my yard. And he told me with soil temperatures, 2-inch soil temperatures in the low to mid 50s now, now's the time to lay that crabgrass preventer. Usually it's much later in the winter / early spring season. But with warm soil temperatures as they are, we're getting a head start in 2023. So,
And I have to wonder what this winter's done for pests. Any thoughts on, now we did have the one December Arctic outbreak, but did that do much to kind of kill off some of the mosquitoes or?
I haven't heard entomology specialists yet, but this has been a trend in recent years, as you were talking about earlier. These warmer winters we've been having. I've been talking about climate trends. Of course, we saw the new climate normals come out a couple of years ago. I presented on it today, and a pest such as fall armyworm, it doesn't overwinter here, but we're getting warmer in Kentucky. They're getting warmer to our south in Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, you name it. So again, I'm not an entomology specialist, but you got to think warmer climate in place, it's going to make that migration easier as we move forward into the future. So, yep.
Any other questions? I know a month or two ago, the question was asked about the impacts of La Nina on the state, and that's something that we're going to look into more to try to quantify with the El Nino coming up. I mean, we know the Southeast is impacted pretty strongly, but the effects in Kentucky are a lot more subtle and not necessarily as reliable, but it's something we'll try and look into more.
So, Jerry, I had another question from Kevin Jeffries. I didn't have a good answer for him. I don't know if you or Chip could talk about this, but he asked, do we know how much water might be added to the reservoirs in Nevada and California?
Wow, I've been on some email threads about that, and it is helping a lot. It would, they don't get enough in a year to fill it up, to fill those reservoirs up. But from what I've seen so far, compared to what they were thinking even a month ago, the reservoir levels are forecast are up 7 to 10% from what they were thinking even a month ago. And it's good news overall. Now, some areas of the Intermountain West are only maybe 110 to 130% above average, which isn't a whole lot, but other areas are seeing record snowfalls. So it's all good news, but it somewhat varies by reservoir, and it's not a clear answer. Maybe Chip, I don't know if you've heard, if you can add to that.
Yeah, I think the reservoirs that come out of the Sierra Nevadas are gonna be in great shape. I mean, just because the insane amounts of water and snow that they've got. I don't think the Colorado Basin's gonna be a lot, like you said. They are only just above average, so I don't know. It's not gonna save. It's not gonna hurt being over, but it's not enough to drastically change Lake Mead and Lake Powell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and California is definitely benefiting. I saw in the news today that Yosemite was closed for the heavy snowfall. So California is definitely being helped, and we saw that in the drought improvement out there.
What was it? Mammoth Mountain has got past 800 inches of snow for the year.
Right. Yeah, parts of New Mexico, I believe, have over 100 inches for the season. Some parts, I think, a record for them. So yeah, I don't know if we answered your question, Matt, but or Kevin, but yeah, it's been fun to watch out there.
Thanks, guys.
Any other questions or comments? It will be interesting to see, you know, where our temperatures go from here, since we started off so warm, it will be interesting to see where we end up following maybe an average March or cooler than average March. What was interesting is just how warm the 1931-32 must have been, because, well, they just had a much warmer December, which we had that one Arctic outbreak. And had we not had that, maybe we would have gotten closer to the 31-32 winter temperatures, but didn't quite beat that, but we're still pretty warm. Any other thoughts or questions? Well, thank you for joining us. And like I said, we'll have this on YouTube recorded and up there momentarily. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next month. Thank you all.